Hey everybody, JT here. Beautiful morning at the compound. So, about 4 months ago, during one of my workouts, in between sets, I couldn't catch my breath. I wasn't hands on my knees gasping for air or anything like that. It's just my heart rate wouldn't come down between sets. So anybody who works out, does cardio, or has basically done anything physical in their life understands that while we're doing something, normally that increases our heart rate. And usually when we stop or slow down, our heart rate comes back down to what it was before we started, or at least where we want to get it down before we do our next exercise or activity. Well, mine wouldn't come down. During my rest periods, it was racing as quickly as when I would just finish an exercise. Having worked out for almost 30 years now, I am very in tune with my body. So I know when the slightest little thing is off. So I wasn't sure exactly what was going on with this. It didn't feel like I was going to pass out. But obviously, after 3 or 4 sets of this not happening, I'm starting to think, am I going to have a heart attack? Am I going to have a stroke? So I just stopped working out that day. It seemed like within 10 or 15 minutes, it was back down to normal. But it was very unsettling. Now everybody goes through a little glitch now and then where something's off for a couple days and then things get back to normal, and usually a couple weeks later we just forget about it, and that's what it is. We just chalk it up to sometimes things happen. So the next day I just walked from the cabin to the gym, which is all of 100 yards, and by the time I got to the gym, I was exhausted. My heart rate was up again, and I sat there for a moment, and it seemed to go back down. So I said, I'm not going to work out today. This isn't right. So it would go a couple days. I stopped working out. I'm trying to figure out what's going on without calling a doctor and having to go through all this stuff. But it got to the point within a week or so that I would literally just walk from the cabin down to let the chickens out, do the morning chores, and by the time I got back to the cabin, after nothing strenuous, my heart was pounding. Not that I couldn't function, and once again, not hands on the knees gasping for air, but just sit down after and it not going back down. So I let this go on for a couple weeks because it wasn't happening all the time, but it was starting to happen when I was doing nothing strenuous. So finally, I was starting to get miscellaneous pains here and there. And one night the pain was pretty intense, not feeling like a heart attack, so I went to the ER. It was very intense. So they did a whole gamut of tests that night, blood work, an MRI, all my tests, blood work, everything came back normal. My O2 levels were 98 and 99. everything was good. After the MRI, the technicians were very impressed with my musculature for a 16-year-old. I guess it shows quite a bit, but nothing. So the ER sent that to my regular doctor, who the next day contacted me, and we began more tests, more blood work, a human pin cushion for a couple weeks. I scheduled a ultrasound, an ECG, and during the course of that test, they discovered that I had a hole in my heart. So this is not an uncommon affliction. Many people are born with a hole in their heart, and most people grow out of it, so to speak. Now, a hole in the heart, it's not like holding up a water balloon and you see a small pin prick that leaks from the outside. A hole in your heart would be actually on the inside of your heart, or technically it could be one of the arteries coming in or one of the ventricles coming out, or even a hole in one of the valves that with each beat open and close to push blood in and out. The ultrasound really didn't pinpoint which one of those it was, because that was just the exterior test. But it did show a hole, which they describe as refraction, which means with the beat of my heart, especially when I'm doing something strenuous, blood was either being pumped into the heart and then out of the heart, but one of those places, as the blood was going out, a little bit would come back in. So picture, we've all seen a handheld gas siphoning kit. There's a tube you stick in a gas tank, and there's a little ball, and you squeeze it, and then there's a tube on the other end. Well, the ball is empty when you start squeezing. Eventually, you see the gas come out of the vehicle into the ball fills up, and then with each squeeze, the gas goes out the other end into the can you have. But each time you squeeze that, if you notice, a little bit of gas that was going out comes back in because you're opening it. Then when you squeeze, it pushes it out, pulls more in. Your heart works very much the same way. There's valves on all the ventricles and arteries coming in and out of your heart, so that during this phase, those close. And then when you squeeze, they open. Pump, pump, and then there's always a certain amount of blood inside your heart. And, that's how our body pushes oxygen to all our muscles and everywhere it needs to go, through the blood. So what's happening with refraction, or a hole in the heart, or one of the valves, is too much blood would be remaining in the heart. Okay, so while you're working out, doing a set or doing something strenuous, the heart's pumping, and it's filling, and it's emptying, and you're not realizing that it's either retaining too much or there's not enough coming in, depending on where the hole is. So when you get done your set, the heart goes into overdrive to compensate for whatever issue you're having, whether it needs more blood or is trying to get rid of excess blood so that it can come down. So it pumps faster based on whichever it's trying to do. That's what causes the increased heart rate. This is how I've been explained to me. So eventually the heart will catch up and your heart rate will go back to normal, because when you're not under stressors, it's not pumping nearly as fast, and so it's not having the same issue. There's probably some leakage, but we don't notice it. So after that ultrasound, they determined that I needed to do the nuclear stress test, which for anyone who's ever had one, it's the regular stress test on the treadmill, but you get injected with nuclear fluid, 45 minutes. They take some photos. They hook you up to an EKG machine, throw you on the treadmill. My particular case, they had to get my heart rate up to 136. Then I had to hold it there for a minute. And then they get you off the treadmill as quick as possible and time it to see how long does it take for your heart rate to get back down to normal. Well, if anyone has ever done those stress tests, those aren't really built for young, in shape folks. The treadmill doesn't go that fast and it doesn't go that high. And me being the lover of cardio I am, have done some to get ready for shows at a certain point, a couple weeks before. So I hop on the treadmill and I'm all hooked up and I'm walking, I'm striding because I walk very fast and my feet are kicking the motor part. Anyone who's ever done a treadmill realizes you try and go fast, you got to increase the speed in it, and sometimes you got to take smaller steps. So I'm striding. I've been doing it for like 5 minutes and my heart rate isn't even at 70 yet. So I'm hanging on with one hand. I'm letting the hand with all the tubes sticking out of it stay loose because the guy's got to inject more fluid later. And there's a woman on a monitor, a woman standing beside me making sure I'm not going to pass out. And so I'm like, you got to turn this up. We got to get it up, get the incline up, put it on max. And she's like, sir, it's on both. And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm trying to take baby steps. I'm almost jogging in place. It's way more work than I planned on doing, trying to get my heart rate up to 136. So I'm busting my butt. So I finally get it up to 136. She's like, okay, can you do it for a minute, please? So I'm doing it. I still hanging on with one hand. And the lady's like, sir, could you please put your other hand on the bar? And I'm like, okay. So I'm pounding it. Finally, she's like, okay, you're done. So like with HIIT training, I just automatically hop and put my feet on both side rails. And the lady freaks out. She's like, oh my God, are you okay? And I go, yeah, that's how I do it when I ever actually do any. And she goes, okay. And she goes, well, go get in the chair then. So I go and sit in the chair and she's hooking me the EKG stuff back up to the computer. But about 30 seconds later, she gets it and she's like, your heart rate's already back down to normal. I didn't get a chance to and I go, we're not doing it again. She goes, no, you're fine. We're not going to do it again. So they go and take more pictures right after that. And then you go home and you wait for the doctor to call and give you your diagnosis. So I'm assuming the phone doesn't ring for 2, 3, 4, 5 days. So I'm assuming, okay, there's no major emergency or they would have called me the day after. So, and I had a follow-up doctor's appointment coming and finally they called. They said, come on in, we'll go over your test results, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay. So I get in there and the doctor's like, okay, you still have a hole, but it seems to have closed or a valve was stuck open with a particulate. Who knows? Could be a little calcium, could have been, I don't know. They don't know. The bottom line was, it hasn't happened since that test 3 weeks ago. So I've been back in the gym. I didn't work out for 2 months. Now, for someone who's been working out for 30 years and never took more than a week off, yeah, you know what that's like. But I was at a point before that nuclear test where I literally couldn't walk 100 yards without having to stop and take a break. And so you can imagine a little bit of scariness going on there. My father did have stents put in. He produces too much calcium. And I thought, okay, they told him that may be a hereditary thing, but we had checked that out, so it's not that. So I got the green light to go ahead and do anything I want again. And just every 6 months, we're going to stay ahead of it. And I'll go in for some tests, probably the ultrasound ECG one, not the nuclear one, unless something pops up where I have to call them and say, something happened, this is what's going on, just like before. But the doctors think whatever it is seems to have fixed itself, and might nothing again ever. It just could be a year or two, could be 5 years. It's one of those, sometimes there's just not really the answer we want. But I put this off for about 2.5 months because it's me. I work out. I'm 60. I do all this stuff. I'm invincible. This was just a glitch in the matrix and it'll go away. Well, I'm lucky that my procrastination and my issue wasn't something, I mean, it's serious, but I'm lucky that it didn't get more serious than it was, because the way I had put it off. So the point of this is, a lot of people had heard that I was having some issues and stuff, and I had started to have people asking that, and so I just wanted to clear everything up. Everything's good, but also to emphasize a point to everyone that don't put stuff off. If you got we always make it worse than it had to be. I know there's a lot of people like me that think they're invincible. I am never sick. Yeah, I broke a couple bones over the course of the career and other things, but not, so no, not me. So anyway, that's where we're at. I hope to not have to do any updates on this. I'm back training for the last 3 weeks. Had to start a little slower, but it isn't like I just started to train again. I'm getting to push some pretty decent weights and go through the soreness I knew was coming. But I also know it's a good one. And that's where we're at. So if you got something going on, you've been thinking about it, don't procrastinate. Just get it looked at, taken care of if needed, and that's what I got. So for now, JT, signing